Good morning. Welcome back to the New Look Daybreak, where we want to take a look at the news that is making headlines on different papers. My name is Sam Gituku.
And my name is Zinzi Kibiku. Before we introduce to you our panel this morning, just an overview of what's making headlines in the local dailies. The Standard newspaper, shocking report on 133 useless courses. It's one of the biggest stories that has gotten covers on page 6 and 7 on the Standard. But another one that has caught my attention, Sam, it has to be the Interpol, where Joho is not on our radar.
Can you imagine, after that contestation, that was people claiming that he has a case to answer. Several members of parliament that had accused him of that. Now it appears that the Interpol has spoken and they are not interested in looking for Joho.
Exactly. And again on page 4 of the Standard newspaper, something that we'll be discussing this morning with the panel, Kenya's demands to Somalia to end this crisis that we're seeing. It is something that has also been well represented and echoed in the Daily Nation. Somalia answers Kenya on oil blocks.
Still, on the front page of the Daily Nation, you see that biometric registration starts today. This is the discussion that has been ongoing. You call it NIMS, National Integrated Identity Management System. The registration begins today for a few of the counties. The piloting is set to cost about 6 billion shillings to digitize Kenyans' identities.
My biggest question, Sam, is what happens to those students in rural areas in Kenya where technology is still a far-fetched thing? What happens to those students?
Let's wait and see the infrastructure that the government is just about to roll out to ensure that that is done. Then on the back page of the Daily Nation, you see a story on graft KPC. This is Kenya Pipeline. On the spot of irregular allowances, the corruption-riddled Kenya Pipeline Company is on the spot again over irregular payment of overtime allowances, according to the latest report of the Auditor General tabled in Parliament. 306
million Kenyan shillings is the big number, the amount that has been paid as overtime allowance to about 1,080 staff, contrary to the company's rules. So, of course, one of the biggest stories as well on the Daily Nation.
So be sure to get your favorite paper to get those details. But first, let's begin with Somalia.
All right, we'll begin with Kenya and Somalia. For those who are just joining us, this is the panel that we have this morning. On my far left, I have Senator Ledama Olekina, Narok County. At the center, I have Member of Parliament Didi Nyoro. He's a Member of Parliament for Kiharu. And on my far right, I have Senator Moses Kajwang of Homa Bay. Gentlemen, it's good to have you with us this morning. Thank you so much for creating time. Now, the thing is, Kenya has hit the reset button on its relations with Somalia. Why? Because 100,000 square kilometers is the bone of contention between Kenya and Somalia. Right now on the Daily Nation, or on the Standard newspaper, Kenya has gone to give its terms in regards to resolving this ocean dispute. 3 of them, to be specific. 1, Kenya has demanded that Somali authorities inform those who bought these oil blocks that it's no longer up for commission. Number 2, Nairobi wants Mogadishu to immediately withdraw a map of this specific scenario that was shared in the Economic Forum. And thirdly, Kenya wants a maritime discussion between the two nations to arrive to an amicable solution. I'll begin with that. Senator Ledama, I'll begin with you in regards to that third discussion for Kenya's resolve on this. The UN has been put on regards to this to be one of the bodies that wants to go ahead and resolve this specific dispute between Kenya and Somalia. Is it that we as African countries, in this regards, Kenya and Somalia, cannot resolve our own dispute before we have to go to international bodies, be it the ICJ, or in this case, the UN?
I think in this case, there are quite very different scenarios here, because there are those in the school of thought who believe that the map which was shared there is a fake map. And I remember yesterday reading somewhere that the Somali administration has come out and said that we didn't auction these blocks.
Right.
You know, so it's very hard to believe what is there. But in hindsight, what I would actually say is that it will be proper for the Somali government to wait until the dispute between Kenya and Somalia is resolved, because there's already a dispute in terms of the the boundary. So until this is resolved, then it should not be, the status quo should remain.
Right.
No entity should be able to, to auction those blocks. I sit in the Energy Committee, the Senate, and of course we're going to be looking deeply into those issues, because if, for example, there's so many scenarios. In my view, I think we first of all have to establish where are these blocks. The relationship between Somalia and Kenya is very important. Remember, we have a very big refugee camp which hosts, millions and millions of Somali refugees. We have a lot of ties between Kenya and Somalia.
KDF soldiers.
KDF soldiers are there. You know, the AMISOM operation, Kenya has invested a lot of money in Somalia. So for me, I see an amicable solution being the best thing for these two neighboring countries, which share so much in common in terms of culture, in terms of tradition, in terms of, you know, a lot of Somalis, you know, look at Kenya as their home. If you look at the businesses that are thriving in Isili, if you look at the relationship between, you know, our members of parliament, there's a lot of interest. So I think the first thing is that we have to, you know, we have to get to the bottom truth, whether the map which Kenya is saying withdraw, if Somalia is saying that is a fake map, that's an old map which is being used by other people, we have to get the facts straight. Were these blocks really auctioned, or is it just you know, a few people who are trying to come up and bring conflict between these two neighboring countries?
Right.
When you look at the situation, Mheshimiwa Nyoro, that the reaction by Kenya, that has also now caused the reaction from Somalia, for instance, saying that the ambassador to Somalia has been summoned to come back home for consultation, and the Somali ambassador has been sent home for consultation. They are saying that this is not recall and expel. Is it warranted a reaction despite the situation that we might be dealing with?
Sam, thank you very much for having us this morning. And I think the reaction by Kenya was warranted. First, because Somalia may have not actually auctioned the blocks, but they have actually offered them for auction. Offered them meaning they are looking for investors on a sharing formula. I mean, you come explore, especially on the upstream of oil, and then you share revenues with Somalia. So basically speaking, Somalia is already treating the contested area as their territory. And remember, Sam, what you are talking about is maritime, because many Kenyans would think probably Somalia is trying to invade Kenya in terms of mipaka, the real ones, the borders. We are talking about how we should actually share our maritime resources with Somalia. It's a very small triangle, I'm sure you have seen it.
Yes.
And I would want to say that...
small on paper, but in actual sense it's pretty big.
Small on paper, but actually very rich. And as you know very well, is that most of the conflict in the world actually emanate from two things. One, of course, is resources, and the other one is identity. And on this case, we are not just talking about oceanic water. We are not just talking about water in the ocean. We are talking about oil, which is a lot of billions of money. And therefore, Kenya was warranted. One, because Somalia has already offered the blocks, but more importantly, I am sure there have been a lot of back and forth between Somalia and Kenya. And if you consider the laws that govern borders, especially national borders, across board from 1929, Kenya actually has a case. But unfortunately, Kenya has been, we have filed those kind of petitions with ICJ, and of course, we are looking up to the UN. But unfortunately, so far, Kenya has lost in many of the preliminary objections. Sorry.
Okay. And Senator Kajwang, when you look at this, we have the Operation Linda that has been in Somalia since 2011 October, if I get that right. Now, the KDF forces are under the AMISOM. And of course, you know the volatile nature of the border that the KDF have been trying to contain alongside the African forces. So when such a conflict emanates, that we are sort of severing our diplomatic ties with Somalia, what's the stake on what are the risks that we face?
Thank you, Sam, and maybe just a correction on the earlier introductions is that Ndindi Nyoro is a member of parliament, but a member of the National Assembly. I am a member of parliament and a member of Senate. It has been a problem.
That's a big problem.
That members of National Assembly are the ones called MPs.
Yes, that's right.
Parliament is one. Kenya has had a number of border conflicts. Up north, where Turkana borders South Sudan, we have the Ilemi Triangle. You see, when we are drawing the Kenyan map, up there it used to be like a triangle of sorts. But there are those who draw the border with a straight line. And that is a conflict that has been registered. It has not just blown out. When you come to the west, Migingo, famous, we've got a dispute with Uganda. There are certain parts of West Pokot that were traditionally claimed by Uganda because, initially before independence, they were part of Uganda. When you come now to the coastal area where we now have a contention, it is not a new thing. This has been there for a long time. It's just that this auction of oil blocks is what now has escalated it.
Right.
But because the matter is before ICJ, it means that it's something that Kenya and Somalia has engaged in over a long period of time.
Right.
The only difference is that now that we are talking about very significant resources, it has led to some kind of backlash and uproar. You see, in the exclusive economic zone, the EEZ, where the Kenyan waters are on the coast, there are lots of foreign fishers who come in to fish for tuna. Tuna is a great product, great delicacy, fetching huge prices.
Right.
Japanese vessels, Chinese vessels, Filipino vessels, and we never do anything about it. But when it comes to oil, we react and react firmly. When it comes to Migingo, our fishermen are always being frustrated by Ugandan and Tanzanian soldiers. And we do nothing. We take a very laissez-faire affair to it. The day we will discover oil on Migingo, that is the day we'll start summoning our ambassadors from those countries. But finally, on our involvement in Somalia,
Right.
I think it is not idle for us to demand that the government also needs to tell us what is the cost of this war in terms of dollars, what is the cost of this war in terms of lives. America went into Vietnam with very huge and very lofty patriotic objectives.
Right.
But we saw how Vietnam turned out for America. America went into Somalia. We saw how Somalia turned out for America. We are not saying that we should retreat out of Somalia as cowards who are losing a war. What we are saying is that in this time and age, we need greater openness without compromising the operation. But because this is a war that is funded by taxpayers, we need to know how many of our dollars are going into that war that could have gone to revive dams, that would have gone to revive agriculture. How many of our boys and girls have lost their lives? All of us here are elected leaders, and we have had funerals in our respective areas. We have had boys who went and never came back.
All right.
This was not a war of cowardice, and I don't want to speak as if I'm afraid of Kenya being in Somalia. What we are asking for is greater openness.
Senator, before we introduce our next guest, I have a specific question for you. When Somalia took Kenya sued Kenya back in April 2014 at the International Court of Justice. Right now, a lot of Kenyans, both critics and common Kenyans, especially if you look at the conversation online, feel as if Somalia has spat on Kenya, given that, number one, as you have rightly said, we have our AMISOM, Kenya Defense Forces there, making sure security is intact within the nation. We are maintaining a lot of their refugees right here in Kenya. Kenyans feel as if this is a spat towards the nation from Somalia.
I wouldn't think so. It's just the discovery of oil that has caused problems, causing problems in Venezuela, causing problems in Libya, causing problems in the Gulf states. This oil is a curse. And that is why, as someone who is into technology, I look forward to a future when our cars will be running off oil. It's already electric cars.
It's happening with Tesla.
It's already happening with Tesla. We're just looking forward to that, because then we shall reduce the conflict. We shall minimize the importance that we attach to oil. If oil had not been discovered off the Kenyan coast, I can tell you no one would care whether that line runs along the latitude or runs, I don't know, in an oblong fashion, whatever it is that it is described. It is all about oil. And the day we shall discover oil in Migingo, I can tell you that we'll set up a naval base.
That will be the start of a conflict. Let's welcome in a member of the National Assembly for Nyeri Town constituency, Ngunjiri Wambugu. Karibu sana, and welcome back to the show.
Thank you very much.
And we are talking about the situation between Kenya and Somalia, the conflict that is now getting to sort of still at the defining stages, looking at that, even though the Principal Secretary for Foreign Affairs said we cannot call it recall, so let's use his words, that they have summoned the ambassador from Somalia for consultation and sent the Somali ambassador to Kenya, back to Somalia. When you look at it, what are you thinking after the impact that you're already facing now? What do you think would be the ultimate solution, and can it be gotten as quickly as possible?
Thank you very much. First and foremost, I think the issue of Somalia and Kenya on this particular fight, it's important for us to remember that there's been this challenge between the boundary of the two countries, and it goes back very many years. It's not something that started in 2014. In fact, the only reason it became news is that in 2014 Somalia actually took Kenya to the ICJ. But there's been a dispute, because the dispute is very simple. Kenya claims that Kenya claims, the parts that Kenya claims are based on how the boundary is supposed to go prior to the latitude, while Somalia says that it's supposed to divert in a certain direction. And then, as my colleague Kajwang has said, the issue of oil has, of course, complicated issues. But I think it's important for us to not just look at the oil. I think what Kenya is claiming here is you do not want to lose territory at all. And the reason countries keep armies is to actually protect the territory. When you get to a situation where a country claims part of your territory, it becomes quite untidy and quite messy. And now here we have a situation where, as of last week, as Kenyans, we believe that Somalia had auctioned blocks that fit or sit on our side of the territory. They claim they haven't. They claim they have not pushed those blocks. They haven't put them up on market. What I am reading is that they actually put up a map that showed that they could auction those blocks. Again, still a bit cheeky in my opinion, because what they're trying to say is we're going to win this case, we put it as a J, and when we win it, we're going to auction these blocks. And Kenya is saying, look, why are you first trying to suggest you already know how this case is going to end up? And I don't think that case is going to end up that way, because unless Kenya is the only country where that boundary is going to turn and take a different angle. In any other country in the world, there's a certain direction that you follow the latitude in the oceans. And that's what Kenya is claiming. That's what has always happened. But I also saw something very interesting from a former foreign affairs minister of Somalia, where he said that what Kenya is trying to do is force Somalia to negotiate and come back to the table.
Is that a possibility?
I don't think so. I think first and foremost, Kenya has always taken the position that this case should never have gone to ICJ. It's a kind of thing that people can sit around and agree on.
Yet they didn't.
No, but I think they actually agreed to settle it out of court. I think back when it first went to ICJ in 2014. A year later, they agreed to go out of court because, remember, for over 100 years, Kenya has always considered this to be their, to be their territory.
Right.
So when they agreed to settle it out of court, I don't know what happened later. And that's why
Somali politics.
I think the Somali, the local politics.
Right.
We remember we had a big crisis with the issue of charcoal again in that area. So I think it's all on interest.
And it dates back to 1979 when Kenya decided that the exclusive economic zone belongs to us historically. And then, so this is not something that happened or rather began last year. But nevertheless, I would love to read a quote for you according to what Ambassador Kamau Macharia, the PS of Foreign Affairs, said. And I quote, "The government of the Federal Republic of Somalia has once again demonstrated that it is yet to attain and embrace political maturity and diplomatic stance of a normal, well-adjusted and properly functioning government." Now that's another question, Senator. The fact that Somalia has long been considered a failing state without a functional government, and it's handling such a big role. And as your fellow counterpart has said, oil and gas is not something to be played around with. Now, the mere fact that Somalia doesn't have a proper functioning government, should that favor Kenya?
I don't think so. I think the issue here that we have to divorce is the issue of interest versus the issue of where the boundary really lies. And I think Macharia is quite right. It's an issue of maturity. I would say interest. Because when you have the interest of the entire nation at heart, then your foreign policy would be inclined to making sure that there's no conflict between your neighboring countries. Because the boundary stretches quite far. People will crisscross. You don't want your citizen to be seen as if they're enemies in another country. And I think what you said earlier on, that Kenyans feel now as if this is a spat on their face after having been so generous to the Somalis. You don't want that culture. So Macharia is quite right. These people have got to be able to mature politically. They have to be able to come and sit down and say, we cannot let our local politics dictate our relationship with our neighbors.
All right, finally on this, Mheshimiwa Nyoro.
Sam, the truth of the matter is that last week, Somalia actually did a presentation in the UK to investors, and they were actually depicting or showing some of the oil blocks in the contested areas as their resource. Therefore, Kenya is not just coming from the weed and actually writing to Somalia. There was a provocation in that matter. But in terms of a failed state, I want to agree with PS Macharia, basically because what you define as a functioning state is a country that has a functional state apparatus, which I think are lacking in Somalia. A country that has accountability in terms of democratic accountability. I don't think that is there in Somalia. And actually a country that operates on the rule of law, which is also absent.
Though we cannot judge them as apparent bigger brother or big brother, because they deserve they are entitled to their own sovereignty and to make their own decisions. Whether they're doing it right or not should not bother us.
I agree, but you know, we are not talking about oil reserves or resources inside Somalia. We are talking about oil in a contested area. And that is why actually the case is on the International Court of Justice. Therefore, Somalia ought to have been patient enough to wait for, of course, the ruling by the ICJ or any other way that Kenya and Somalia can sort out the issue.
All right.
Could I just have a final word on this? That we must be cautious. That we as panelists do not sound war drums. Kenya and Somalia are not at war. And as I said, this matter has been on for a long time. Do you know the effect of Somalia's interpretation would mean that Kenya would also claim some territory of Tanzania? Because you see the way the border runs, I think, is it diagonally? It has the effect of hiving off some territory from Tanzania. So this should not be seen, and I'm looking at newspaper headlines and the coverage yesterday. It's as if something has been stolen from us and we must fight. This is an issue that has been on for a long time, but maybe what we need to focus on is the Somalia question. It's not just about the oil, but it's about the war also. It's about the issues of unification. It's about the issues of the elections upcoming in Jubaland. It's also about the issue of refugees. Somali presents a lot of questions that we cannot deal with it just by focusing on these oil blocks. All right,
before Mheshimiwa Gunjiri have a say, you can text us your views on 22422 or you can tweet us at Citizen TV Kenya. You can also call us live on 0719 777 again 0719 777, or you can use the line 0742 961 343. That is 0742 961 343. Of course, we'll be sure to pick your calls. Once you do that, you can text us your questions or air them or tweet us, and we'll be sure to read them. I hear we have an SMS, if we can look at that. If Kenya overreacted by expelling Somalia diplomat of unproven allegations, it will be a huge embarrassment. Another case of incompetency in our diplomacy and intelligence. It's similar to numerous cases we read of suspects shot dead. Gunjiro Mbogo, your final word.
My final word on this. It's also important for us to understand that countries do very interesting things to try and rally their people around them. And one of the proven strategies is to start a conflict with a neighbor. It has a way of rallying everybody. And as you discuss about how Somalia is trying to bring itself together, one of the things that we also must consider is that we might actually have some politicians within the Somalia government who think that by actually pushing a conflict with Kenya, you're going to now rally Somalians, the Somalis in Somalia around them. Because what we are seeing is a situation where you're now calling into question Somalian nationhood, and you're asking every Somali wherever you are to now come together and disagree with Kenya on this one. And see, so the Americans have done it all the time. Every time they have a local problem, they attack some other country or they start a conflict with another country, and then you can't now discuss local issues because you are in conflict with another country. So when you think about all the things that the Somalia as a country is asking about this particular boundary, and you understand the repercussions of what would happen if they actually got what they did, that you'd have to now start readjusting boundaries down the coast, the entire coast, like 3 or 4 other countries. You understand that they most probably know they will not get what they want, but this is a very good conversation to keep going. And keep on having an international conversation as you try and sort out your local and domestic issues.